You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today, my guest is going to help us with an interesting topic that if you're a leader in a particular business, whether you're the owner of the company or just on the senior leadership team or any leadership team, there's the notion at some point in time you may think you've got a book in mind, a story you want to tell, and maybe it has to do directly with your career journey, but it could be something else. But my guest helps leaders do just that, get that story out, published, and ready to go. Her name is Amanda Johnson. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited about talking about this. It's my favorite thing to talk about.
So given the interesting twist, and you alluded to it a little bit, help me understand in the green room your journey, but tell the listeners kind of your path to get to where you are right now, and then we'll dive into the meat of it.
Yeah, it's one of those funny things where people say, did you go to school for this? And I think, no, unless you call it the school of hard knocks. I had a bunch of really ideal passions. I wanted to be a journalist, and then I got to school and I realized, no one taught me how to think critically, how to wrestle with good ideas. I think I'll go be a history teacher and teach young people how to kind of wrestle with this before they out in the world by themselves. Got into the education system, had this little boy at home, and I just did not have it. I mean, my own personal emotional story was catching up with me, and I didn't have enough energy to give those kids what they needed every day. Because, new teacher, they give you the kids that none of the other seasoned teachers want in their classroom. So it was just a whole ordeal. So I left that and I had the opportunity to become a writing instructor online while my kid was sleeping. It was this perfect little setup, learned how to do the writing coaching, always a good writer. I wanted to be, a journalist, technical writer. And so I went out to share about this wonderful program that I was working in, and I went to the wrong market. I went to a bunch of female entrepreneurs, little networking meeting, and they said, we don't want you to teach us how to write well. We need you to quickly fix what we have been writing because it's not working. Our manuscripts aren't landing, our brochures aren't working, the website's not catching. And so I opened up this little editing business and started to get a lot of manuscripts as people started to hear about me in the community. And I realized that, I was making these so much better with storytelling and deeper engagement and kind of organizing their ideas. Because as you know, when you've been on the journey of leadership for a long time, it's very easy to forget where you started. It's very easy to forget those
Absolutely.
first steps and feelings and fears and all the things. And we make assumptions that other people kind of already know the things that we learned early, or even have the same superpowers that we have that we don't really put any value on. So we don't put them into books. So I was learning all of these things, and it was kind of brutal giving these manuscripts back to these individuals who'd written books they'd been working on these manuscripts sometimes for 5 years. And so, to hack it up into a bunch of little pieces and make it so much better, I just watched them think, what I saw was, how much time did I waste, And so I started to help people from the beginning. And that's when I really realized, they're running into a lot more than sort of disorganized ideas as they're moving into this journey of taking what they've learned, because these were masters. These were award-winning, hyper-achieving individuals in their fields, so well respected. They wrote theses, and yet writing this book was too hard. Why? So yeah, that's the journey I've been on.
Yeah. Well, so many things I think about, and you said at one point you were kind of an agent. Maybe that's the wrong word, but you were representing those manuscripts, trying to get out to publishing houses, and frustrated with that process at many levels. So you've started your own now. You've got your own imprint you're doing, right?
Yeah. So as the manuscripts got done, I started to help people through the process of self-publishing. But in certain fields and domains, people really felt like they needed an imprint, which is hard to get. Back in the day, it was kind of hard to get with the big houses because you need a big following generally and a robust marketing plan. You have to prove that you're going to make all of their money back. And so my clients weren't really those people, but they needed a little bit more than self-publishing. So when hybrid became a thing, the best of both worlds, lots of creative control and ownership of rights, usually, and bigger distribution, they started to move in that direction. But because I'd helped them to birth the book and a lot of times the brand that they were going to take into the world, I was kind of in the background. What does the book cover look like? And I became a consultant of sorts. And I saw I saw them being mistreated in the industry. I saw a lack of care around the very important things, especially for CEOs and entrepreneurs. Like you have to have that brand presence, and it has to be congruent and consistent everywhere. And some of these hybrid publishers just did not have a mind or a person for that. And that expertise. So, my 19-year-old son at the time, I think he got really tired of hearing me storm out of my home office, slam the door, probably curse a little bit, because my people were being so mistreated. And he said, "Why don't we just start our own? We already have a team. We already know how to do most of it." And so he's my business partner now. We opened Saved by Story to create a more boutique option for people who need that hand holding through the process.
I love it. That's just a great story. So, elaborate, if you will, on the idea of a hybrid publishing. I think a lot of people still think it's a black and white. You either go to the big publishing house, get picked up, or you got to just endure the journey of trying to self-publish. So, what is hybrid? How does that really work?
So, so self-publishing gives you, it's you're doing this full investment, right? You have to find experts and professionals to help you get the cover together, to help you get the interior formatted, figure out how to get it put on Amazon and all of those things. And like you said, I think the way that you said that made me think it's a little bit of an ordeal, because you have all of this creative control, which is great if you know what you're doing. But if you don't, then you have to rely on experts. And if you don't have great referrals, sometimes the experts aren't as helpful. And so there's that avenue. You get to own all of your rights. You do all of the investment. You put it on Amazon. You do all of the marketing, and hopefully see some return. The other way traditionally has been the traditional publishing, which are with the big houses. Think Penguin, think Random House, Simon and Schuster. And so when you want to traditionally publish, that's nearly the opposite of self-publishing. The publishing house looks at your manuscript and your marketing plan. I've heard that they usually flip to your marketing plan before they look at the content of the manuscript. Because what they're doing is they're investing. It's a business decision. We believe in this manuscript. We're going to pay for all of those pieces that have to be done in order to make this book a reality. And then we want to know that the author has a lot of plans to be out there speaking, podcasting, promoting, whatever is in their wheelhouse to do to sell all of these books. That's one of the myths of the traditional publishing industry, is that they do all of the marketing and sales. And they do quite a bit, especially if you come in with a big brand name. Sometimes they'll put a PR person behind you or add a little bit to that advance to help you get the team that you need around you to make that go. But generally speaking, it's on the author to get the message out and to figure out how to do that. So those are the two extremes, right? Now you have hybrid, which is it's positioned to be like the best of both worlds. So one of the things that happens when you go the traditional route is that you sell the rights to your content. Now, that makes some CEOs and entrepreneurs a little nervous, because their content is oftentimes their framework, their bread and butter. And so it's very important to have those media attorneys, those IP attorneys looking at those publishing contracts and making sure that it's just the content in that manuscript that they are owning, not movie rights to create a movie behind your back. I've heard that story. Not rights to your framework, so that every time you use the framework you developed, you have to give them credit, pay them money, like all kinds of crazy things that have happened in this industry. And so the beauty of hybrid is that generally speaking, you usually get to own all of the rights to your content. So it's a really good option for the entrepreneurial types. And then you also get access to that larger distribution that the publishers have. So you can get on more platforms than, let's say, just Amazon or Barnes and Noble. When you self-publish, you have a very minimal amount of places that you can kind of figure out how to get your book into those places on your own. Very, very hard to get into bookstores if that's one of your lifelong dreams. Hard to do when you're self-published, but easier to do if you're hybrid published and have another imprint and that sort of distribution.
Yeah. I've, as most of my followers know, I've got several books that I've self-published and gone out, and I probably ought to think about, do I want to say this publicly? But I'll admit to something I tried when I tried to release my first book. I had joined a bunch of book communities, authors and publishers that were talking about the process and trying to learn some ideas. And there was one lady in there that said she was going to self-publish, but she decided to take a stack of her books to Barnes and Noble and just put them on the shelf. And she had her barcode on it. And if somebody were to pick it up and take it to checkout, it's going to hit the system. And they're not really they're going to take the money. So for that stack of 5 or 6 books, copies, she wasn't going to earn anything on it because they were just going to collect all the money and keep it. But as it hit the system, it did a reorder. And all of a sudden she started getting orders for it. And I thought, well, that's a really neat idea. I think I'm going to try that. So I confess, I took a small stack to my local Barnes and Noble. Didn't really ever hear anything from it, but I was in there about 2-3 years later, and I went down that aisle and noticed 2 of my copies are still there, So the way they do inventory control, they didn't chunk my book. It's still sitting there. So, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I actually heard, I think it was Jack Canfield told a story like that because, I think one of the things that people run up against when they're thinking about writing a book, publishing a book, marketing a book, is we tend to look at the people who are really successful and think, wow, they just made it. This sort of overnight success. But if you get to hear their stories, you realize, I think Jack Canfield got rejected maybe at least 75 times with different publishing houses,
Yeah.
with Chicken Soup for the Soul. You know what I mean? It was like this thing that became like a worldwide phenomenon, got rejected so many times. And I don't remember if it was that book, but I remember him talking about him doing that too. And it gave people, the idea to run out and give it a shot.
Go try it. Yeah. Well, so let's talk a little more about exactly your process and what you're helping. I mentioned to you in the green room, I've had a number of really well-accomplished leaders on my show here, and I'm sure they've got stories to tell, and we didn't really ever talk. They might have a manuscript in the works. I don't know, but what do you typically do for a client who engages with you?
So we work from inspiration to impact. Like I said, I figured out that working from the beginning was better because it's good to have someone else's eyes and ears and heart oftentimes on the story, asking the questions to find those little spaces where you might not think things are important, but they are to a reader. And so when I originally started working with individuals, they, like I said, high performing, really busy people, I realized I needed to kidnap them with consent. So I developed a retreat model because it was simply too hard to get these folks to focus on anything but the millions of obligations that they had every day. And so this was oftentimes the first big adventure for people, was trying to figure out how to get away for 3 days to focus on something that was just for them. And so we work in a retreat model, really focused on helping people to get to their own voice and their own, you're talking about leaders, you're talking about that transition and the hero's journey from having made a journey and coming to the end of it and thinking, like, I have some elixir, some treasure to bring back to my industry or the younger professionals who are coming up. I was just speaking with a gentleman yesterday in the mental health field. He's been there for 40 years and watched all of these tremendous changes happen in 40 years. You can imagine with technology and drug therapy and what's happening with neuroscience, like all of these giant things happening. And he's watching these young people coming up and he's thinking, like, we're missing here. We have all of this advancement, and yet we're kind of losing access to some of the most essential parts that were his wheelhouse and what people know him for. And so there's this idea of, if you've been in the game for a long time, we need your wisdom as elders to make sure that the way we advance, we're bringing the treasures from the past with us and not leaving them aside for whatever's trending, right? So, really important to have the individual's personal reflections and their own voice. And then we work through a process to organize all of their ideas and stories. And for me, getting them to that first retreat, my goal is always to have them write the first chapter by the end of the retreat, because one thing is, you can have a lot of mastery in a lot of different domains, or perhaps only one, and then step into the world of writing a book and think, I don't know anything. I was always told I wasn't a great writer. I get confused. I've had lots of folks who are highly successful, but neurodivergent, ADHD or dyslexia. And so they just have these barriers. And so part of what I'm doing is partnering with them to show them, number one, this is how you build a scene. This is how you engage. And so I'm doing a lot of writing coaching, but I'm also doing a certain amount of the partnership in the writing and lifting beyond just the thought partnership, so that they can move really quickly. By then, the first week, they're thinking, wow, if I wrote a chapter in a week and I have 7 chapters outlined, right? Like all of a sudden that high performer starts to kick in, because now I have someone on my team to make what I'm doing work. And as soon as we kind of get that energy moving, then we have, online opportunities for them to co-work with us, get help as they need. And we're seeing the individuals finish in like 6 to 9 months is our average for completing a manuscript. We give everybody 12 because oftentimes, especially if there are personal stories in the mix, life happens. There's usually something else that the universe is moving into place to help expose something that we haven't seen, or help us clear something up before we move into a lot of visibility around something. And so we just create that space.
Yeah, I like that. Several things come to my mind. I know when I embarked on trying to do my first book, I explored a lot of things. I said I joined a lot of groups, and we're talking to a lot of people about the process and everything. And there was one tidbit of wisdom I was given by an accomplished author that I was following, and he said, you have to make it clear when you sit down, are you going to be the writer or are you going to be the author?
Mm.
And his point was, too many people, particularly high-performing people, they become self-critical of the first chapter that they've put down. They go, oh, this is, and they start editing and doing all the, looking for commas and conjunctives and all the things that they might think they know about writing, and they start hacking it up, but they miss the point. That's when you're becoming the author, editor persona. Just be the writer. Just lay it out there. Just go with it. And I was actually coaching an individual last year, maybe it was a year before, and he said he had a passion to want to write his story because he had grown up in poverty in India, had made it to school, come to the United States, gone to work for a very major, Fortune 500, climbed the ladder there, had become a very senior executive, and was doing quite well. He was responsible for a group of about 3,000 people or something like that. So he had a really compelling personal story. But as we talked about it, he said, I'm a terrible writer. I know that. That's the one thing I really didn't do in school was focus on the writing, partly because of English as a second language. That became a thing for him
Yep.
and a journey. And so I told him, I said, I tell you what, I said, I'm not a pro in this space, but just, and I told him the writer author thing, don't be critical of it. Just start putting it out there
Mhm.
and send me a first cut of whatever we weren't even going to call it a first chapter. Just put something together to get the thing started. Let me take a look at it, and I'll give you some feedback. So he sent it to me, and admittedly, it was rough. It was really rough. But to me, in my humble opinion, it was already a compelling story. Just the little bit he had laid out there, like his first, I guess I'm going to say 18 years that he tried to encapsulate in this one edition. And I told him, I said, look, man, I said, let's put all of the technical stuff aside for a minute. I said, you have a powerful story. You do. You need to keep going with this. I said, I'm not the person, but I'm confident you will be able to find a person that can take this and really turn it into a consumable book story.
Yeah. Well, and it's tricky for these high performers, right? Speaking as one, um, to put yourself in a space where you feel like you've lost access to all of your mastery, especially when you need it in order to put it into the book, right? So you would just have that space. So much of the work that I'm doing is trying to figure out where the weaknesses are and where the stories are about what's going to stop them, and figure out how to create that quick scaffold. Because I have people who come in, they're very technical writers, so well organized, but the minute they start to tell a story, they just overshare, or it's not engaging enough, or so then I'm like, okay, everything is well organized, let's work on this storytelling piece. This is how you do it, this is where we're going to insert it to keep it moving throughout the book. And then I have the storytellers, these are my usually my very intuitive speakers who can get on any stage and engage any audience without any preparation usually, right? And they sit down at a screen and they just go blank because there's no energy calling to their intuition saying, right? So they need someone in the space to act like the audience and say, okay, here's what we need, right? Based on everything that you say that you've done and accomplished, here's what we need. Here's the call to adventure for the writing. And then be able to help them to stay on track as they go. Because those intuitive people, they'll just keep storytelling and beyond the point of accomplishing the goal for that chapter or even the book, right? It's like leave some of it for the stage, leave some of it for the coaching session. And so it really is about sort of just like we have to do in leadership, right? We have to sort of figure out like this is the part that only I can do. I'm going to hold on to this. And then I'm going to put someone or a few people around me who know how to do all of the other parts. And I don't know how often I say that to my clients. Do the part that only you can do. I cannot download the stories out of your brain. Put them on the page. I will help you to shape them, make them powerful. And along the way, they learn how to tell a powerful story. They learn how to communicate
Right.
persuasively because it's kind of like this ongoing wrestling match. And then by chapter 3 or chapter 4, they're like, oh, hey, look, I'm doing it myself. Great. And then it's just a little bit of refining as we go on my
Right.
part.
Right.
Yeah.
I know I did engage. Maybe technically I was doing hybrid at the time and didn't know it, but when I had done my first manuscript, I did engage a publishing house, um, a smaller independent house to help me with some of the formatting and the editing and everything. And I was a little bit apprehensive about having an editor hack at my manuscript. It's not. I'm generally not a prideful guy in that way, but there was still, it was unknown and uncertain, and I was kind of worried. But I was thankful because I actually was given access to two different editors at that house. We did a first cut with one editor, and she was very, well, she was brutal, but she was also, she had a high dose of compliment and constructive. I mean, I got the thing back in classic Word document form with all the comments in the margin. And there were times she was going, no, you don't want to say it this way. This is confusing. What about this? Da, 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 da. But then there were other parts that she would make a little paragraph that said, dang, this is amazing. I never thought about this. I want to try this, and I want to. So there was a nice, blend of not just being perpetually critical of everything, but some occasional encouragement words in there and everything. So it was an interesting. And then the publisher recommended the second run, and I don't even remember why now, but we did that. And the second editor was a little more brutal. And I don't know how that works out internally at the house with the two editors, how they, I was trying to imagine that discussion if there was one.
There is. So you have, and oftentimes people don't know this, and this is where it can be a little nerve-wracking because you have this manuscript, and ideally at a publishing house that is going to put their imprint on the book, they want to make sure that this book is as good as it can be. And so they'll look at it and say, here's why we want to purchase it. Here's why we think it has potential. And here are all of the things that are not where they could be as it relates to structure or storytelling. And it's sort of this big, I feel like there's a little gap between 4 and 5. I want to talk to you about that. Right. And so they don't exactly know how to make it better for you, but that's the developmental. I'm going to have conversations with you. I'm going to show you where I feel like the energy just kind of falls off, or where you speed through something too quickly and we need to unwrap it. So it's that bigger conversation across the whole project. And then typically, once you've gotten that part nailed with the developmental editor, it's moving to copy editing, and they are a little more brutal. And it's also, I think, that part can be nerve-wracking for a different reason. The first part is, I have this framework, I have this mastery, I know my stuff. I don't really love the idea of someone challenging me, right? And challenging my so many years of experience. So there has to be that like beginner's mind. I'm gonna try to I'm in service to the goal of the project to be as good as it can be. But then you have the copy editors, and the copy editors are all about grammar, punctuation, and they're more technical. And so they're very much looking at style. And this is one of the things particularly, novelists always run into this because, the characters have their dialect, their mannerisms, and those voices become very important to the writers. But in nonfiction, it's the same way. I've had clients who will say, I'm going to hand you this manuscript, but you have to promise me that you will not remove any of the ain'ts. And it's like, okay, right? Because that's part of their voice. So when you're working through, that's part of what people will experience when they see them on stage or hear them on a podcast, right? You have to make sure that copy editor really preserves the voice, even if it's not technically, grammatically perfect. And so that part of the process can feel a little like, oh, no, don't mess up my voice. This is the way that I speak. This is the way that I write. So it can be a little bit of a wrestling match for that reason.
Well, let's talk about, I guess I'll call it the future of books. I mean, when I think about technology, social media, everything that's going on, and there are these apps now that what's the one? Speech, I think, is one. SPEECH, I think I saw referenced in an executive forum I was dipping into. That may not be the right name, but there's some app out there that will take a giant manuscript, and it's kind of like the modern version of Cliff Notes. Back in my day, we had the Cliff Notes version of these great big novels we were supposed to be reading in school.
Yep.
And you get tasked to read The Great Gatsby, and as a 10th grader, and you're like, no, I don't
What?
want to read that.
For me, it was, how about the Iliad and the Odyssey in the
Yeah.
first 2 weeks of college? That's more than I've read in my entire life.
Yeah,
Thank
exactly. And so there's these condensed versions of it, and of course AI is now becoming a master of that summation and give you the gleaning of it. So with all that going on, what do you see as the future of the traditional manuscript go to book?
So interesting. I'm having so many conversations about this, and even with my team, because we're looking at how to use these sorts of apps and AI to make us more efficient on our side as far as the business and the operations. And I had one person who said, "But why don't you do it with the content?" And the reason why I don't do it with the content is because there's something that is so human and so vital to our own personal and professional development to sit down and get our ideas out for ourselves and to then see them on the page and say, is that really what I believe? Is that really why I was successful? Let me think about that. Let me wrestle with that. And because you've written these books, right? It does feel like a little bit of a wrestling match with your own ideas and the principles that you've lived your life by. And sometimes you find things that you're like, "Ooh, maybe I shouldn't put that in there because," And so for me, that part of the process is one of my favorite parts, because the people who begin chapter one are not the people who finish the manuscript. They have a deeper understanding and depth of knowledge and depth of embodiment in their own mastery and message by the time they're done with the writing. So as far as the content development goes, now when you're talking about trying to shorten up things like the copy editing process, why not let AI go through and give it those parameters? Don't take out my ain'ts, right? You give it all of the style guide parameters. Sure, why not? That will speed up that process. But I would never say, okay, and then let's put it into interior design, because for me, there is that human element. I want to make sure that it's landing for the human reader the way that we need it to, without the AI coming in between in some way. So, proofreading, those sorts of things. Like I see a lot of opportunity for the business side of books to be made far more efficient. My concern is just about the human, because, we've been telling stories for millennia. This is what we do. Books are just another iteration of sitting around campfires and the elders saying, this is where we came from. This is why it matters. This is where we're headed. These are the lessons you need. And so anything that kind of gets in the way of that, I'm a little nervous about myself.
Well, my 2 cents on that question are that among a lot of my coaching clients who are, late 30s, early 40s in their career journeys, they're still consuming books, and the vast majority. I mean, a few of them will allude to, I'm listening to an audio book.
Yep.
I'm just like I listen to podcasts, and I get that. But a vast majority of them will be sitting in a session, and they'll pick up a book and they'll flash it in the screen and say, "This is the book I'm reading right now," and it's hard copy, and it's good old fashioned publication, and I'm encouraged by that. To your point, I think the real in-depth human element of the conveyance of those themes and ideas is hopefully something that leaders of the future will still embrace, and not rely on some AI screen to give them an answer about an idea.
Yeah.
I guess that's jury's still out on that. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. But, to your point, even I was hearing my son tell someone the other day that the readership of actual print books, because everyone is asking us, should it just be an ebook? Should it, there's a lot of sort of assumptions that because we're in this technological age, books are not a thing anymore, but it's not the case. People still want to hold wisdom in their hands while they're digesting it. There's something about having that physical access to it that I think is really important and might be forever, the second best thing to sitting with a wise elder and listening to them tell their stories face to face.
Well, Amanda, this has been great. Thank you so much for sitting in. Tell people how to get a hold of you.
Go to www.savedbystory.house. And if you hit /foreshadows, FORE shadows, there's a whole bunch of free content. In fact, I was thinking about what is the proper publishing pathway. It would answer a lot of your questions about self-publishing, hybrid, and traditional. So people can get like a full hour sort of looking at the different priorities and assessing which pathway is the right one for them to pursue.
Wonderful. Sounds great. Well, we will have that information in the show notes, folks. So when you get to a safe place and can look for the links there, please feel free to jump in and check out Amanda's work. And one last time, thank you so much for sitting in with us. Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it.
Well, folks, we're at that end of the show here. Hopefully you'll got something from this. And if you've got that book idea percolating in your brain, no time like today to get started and get after it. You heard the assignment, get that first chapter out there and see what it feels like. And then reach out to Amanda if you need some help with the rest of the journey. But we do have a video version of this show over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, check out. We celebrated our 400th episode not long ago and marching now into the 500s. So looking forward to that. But check out the archives, see if there's a topic you missed, or let me know if you've got an idea for a guest or a topic you'd like to hear in the future. Just drop me a line, leave a comment, and we'll be in touch. But with that, I'm going to sign off, say goodbye. Go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.